Hi, welcome to St Bryce, Kirk. Nice to see you all here. My name is Marie Penman, and I'm involved in campaigning for an independent Scotland. It's only 8 months until the referendum, and I think it's important for people to hear all the facts before making a decision on whether to vote yes or no to that all-important question: should Scotland be an independent country? Tonight I'm delighted to welcome a guest speaker to Kirkcaldy who has his own views on why we should be voting yes. Tommy Sheridan first got involved in politics while a student at Stirling University, but rose to prominence when he led the campaign against the poll tax. And just to remind you, this was implemented in Scotland a full year before it was introduced to the rest of the UK, so what happened to being better together back then? Tommy has been a campaigner and activist for all of his adult life, fighting against the poll tax, inner city poverty, the deployment of nuclear weapons in Scotland, benefit cuts, and more recently the bedroom tax. As an MSP back in 2002, it was Tommy Sheridan who first proposed the bill to give free school meals to all Scottish children, something I'm glad to say was recently passed in Holyrood. A long-time supporter of Scottish independence, it's interesting to note that most of the things that Tommy Sheridan has campaigned against in his lifetime would be scrapped in an independent Scotland. It's an honour to have him as part of our campaign. Please give a very warm welcome to Mr. Tommy Sheridan.
Thanks very much, folks. That was a very lovely introduction, and I hope I'll do that introduction some honour here tonight. I'm hoping that we can have as much time as possible for questions, because it's no use having meetings where all you do is sit and listen. We need to have a wee bit of interaction. We need to try and stimulate some debate and hopefully generate more light than just heat. Because so far in the debate that revolves around the very future of our country, I'm afraid there is far too many occasions where it becomes mudslinging and personal slanging rather than actually having a bit of educated and informed debate. I think we've got to try and persuade people of the case for independence. I think we have to try and persuade people to have the confidence to take their own destiny in their hands in September 18th and actually become a sovereign nation. I think it is very, very important to realise that many, many other countries that have fought for such sovereignty over the years have actually had to take up arms to fight for that type of sovereignty. We're getting the chance without one single bullet getting fired. All we're having to do is to go to a ballot box and put a cross beside yes, and we can become a nation. There are two things I wanted to start with in relation to what I think is the background to this discussion. Two stories. One revolves around the report that Oxfam released just last week. Some of you may have read it. Oxfam have revealed that such is the grotesque level of inequality in our planet today that we now have 85 individuals who have a collective wealth greater than half the world's population. Try and just think about that for a moment, because figures can just roll over you. 85 people have got more combined wealth than 3.5 billion people. That, to me, is why I'm involved in politics. That's why I want to fight for independence, because it's that type of grotesque inequality that we have to fight against, that we have to make a stand against, that we have to make a difference about. And I think in an independent Scotland, we can start to reverse the trend of inequality by having a small country that puts social justice and equality at the forefront of its policies, rather than being a mere soundbite that is discarded at the first opportunity. That's one story that is in a background to tonight's discussion. The other story revolves around a woman called Sheila Holt. Sheila featured in a Daily Mirror story. Sheila is a woman from Rochdale who is mentally ill and who had her income support stopped just over 2 weeks ago. She, as a part of the trauma, had a heart attack and fell into a coma. A couple of days ago, she received letters, or at least the letters were delivered to her home and brought to her in hospital where she was still in a coma, from Atos, asking why she wasn't presenting herself as fit for work. Now, the reason that story is important is because Atos probably gives us a definition of cruelty, a definition of social brutality in relation to an organisation that has paid £1.6 billion of your money to hound and harass the poorest, most vulnerable people in society, causing increased despair, fear and suicide. Interesting, in terms of this theme of inequality, you won't have heard of this guy, Thierry Breton. You won't have heard of him, but he's the chief executive of Atos, and last year he qualified for a wage rise, £297,000 wage rise. Now some of you are sitting thinking, well, Tommy's got that wrong. Obviously what he means is he's qualified for a wage of £297,000, and that's obscene enough. But no, brothers and sisters, the reality is he now has a wage of £2.3 million. His wage rise last year was just under £300,000 to take him to £2.3 million, to be the boss of a company that sends out threatening letters to mentally ill women in comas in hospitals. And you know something? The reason I want to talk about Sheila Holt is because the response to what happened to Sheila Holt in Rochdale, the response from her local Labour MP sums up, crystallises the reality of the choice that faces us here in Scotland. Because faced with what happened, Simon Dankuchik, who is the Labour MP in Rochdale, was questioned by the local newspaper about what he thought about what happened to his constituent. And his answer right away in relation to this letter from Atos being delivered to a mentally ill woman in a coma in hospital, the first line of his answer was, "I am in favour of welfare reform, but the way the coalition are doing it is to try and bulldoze the changes. It has to be done slower." There's no condemnation from the local Labour MP about what Atos have done in relation to £1.6 billion of public contracts. No condemnation of the hounding of the poor. No condemnation of the welfare cuts. Why? Because the reality is, it doesn't matter who wins the next general election. The welfare cuts are going to continue. The hounding of the poor is going to continue. I sometimes find it incredible when I watch some of the debates on telly and people have a go at those that are supporting the Yes campaign, they say, yeah, but you can't be certain about this and you can't be certain about that. I'll tell you what we can be certain about. Voting no in September is going to mean more austerity. That's what we can be absolutely certain about. There is no doubt that a no vote in September 18th means more austerity on September 19th. These people think they haven't gone far enough. These Tory spivs and millionaires. They've already introduced a programme of £40 billion worth of cuts. They've now announced another £40 billion worth of cuts. And Cameron and co, every time we have Prime Minister's questions, they goad Mr Miliband. What would you do? Are you going to reverse the cuts? And they sit there, shamefaced, because the reality is they're not going to reverse a single cut. They've said, we'll do it differently. They've even said they wouldn't do it as quick. Well, I don't know about you, but if you're condemned to death, does it matter whether you're killed with the first slash across the throat or the second or third? For goodness sakes, when are they going to develop some backbone and stand up against these people? When are they going to develop? When are they going to develop some tradition and history? And to remember that the Labour Party and the Labour movement was founded by people that fought for welfare, that fought for a free health service that's getting dismantled in England as we speak. They've got a cheek, haven't they? Marie was talking earlier about Mr Brown of this part of the world, who talks about if we move away from the United Kingdom, what does it mean for the United National Health Service? As if in an independent Scotland we won't have a health service. He should know better, because the reality is the health service in Scotland here today is not only better, but it's more public than the health service in England is right now. That's the reality. These people have lined up the health service for their big, rich friends. They're already selling it off bit by bit. That's their plan. We have got to say to ourselves, brothers and sisters, in relation to the background to this discussion, we are in the midst of an economic crisis. An economic crisis that had got absolutely nothing to do with ordinary workers, benefit claimants, immigrants, or any of the other scapegoats that this condemned government is using. We're in the midst of an economic crisis caused by bankers and irresponsible politicians. That's who's responsible for the problems. You look at the Office of National Statistic figures, they show that we now have bailed out the banking sector to the tune of £19,000 for every man, woman and child across the United Kingdom. £1.2 trillion is how much has been used to bail out the bankers. How dare they attack benefit claimants? How dare they attack trade unionists? How dare they attack immigrants or anyone else that is unable to speak up for themselves, when the reality is it's the rich and the privileged that are the problem. Austerity, definition, punishing the poor for the mistakes of the rich. That's what austerity represents, brothers and sisters. And we have an opportunity, don't we? We have an opportunity in September 18th to say, no, we're not travelling in this bus any longer. We're getting off this bus. We're going to do things differently. You see, let's not make the mistake. Deliberately, you'll hear from those with their project fear and negativity. Yeah, it's all about Alex Salmond. Do you really support the SNP? Brothers and sisters, this vote is bigger than any single political party. This vote is about the very future of our country, of our children, of our children's children. This vote isn't about whether you like Alex Salmond or you don't like Alex Salmond. This vote is about whether your country is going to put people before profit, about whether your country is going to send young kids to die in illegal wars, about whether your country is going to spend money on giving kids a decent, healthy, nutritious, free meal, or whether your country is going to have a publicly owned health service and a mail service which has been privatised in England that won't be privatised in Scotland. Anyone worth their salt, brothers and sisters, in my opinion, anyone worth their salt within the Labour Party, they should welcome a yes vote. Not because it means they can roll away the red flags, because there'll be no role for them in an independent Scotland. On the contrary, the Labour Party in Scotland would be rejuvenated, transformed in an independent Scotland. Because in an independent Scotland, when you stood for the Labour Party, you could actually stand for Labour values instead of the South East Tory values what the Labour Party now stands for. You hear a lot about political consensus. Apparently it's consensual to attack benefit claimants, regardless of the fact that the biggest majority of benefit claimants are workers. You know, the Tories, they try and promote the image, don't they? With the shut curtains analogy of that man of darkness, Mr. Osborne. How do these people know? 29 members in a cabinet, 23 of them are personal millionaires. What do they know about living in low pay, living in benefit, living in a council house? What do they know about those things and worrying about the future of your kids? They don't know about it. They get in and out of the studios for their sound bites off the Starship Enterprise, because that's the different planet that they inhabit. I've debated with them with things like the bedroom tax, as Marie said earlier, where you talk about how they have decided to attack some of the very poorest, most vulnerable people. They've not just went for the working class, they've went for the poorest sections of the working class. Because the only people that are affected by the bedroom tax are those in receipt of housing benefit. To be in receipt of housing benefit, you have to prove that you're poor. It's a means-tested benefit. You have to either be low paid or you have to be on benefit. Well, brothers and sisters, they're going after you if you're in that position. Why? Because they think you're an easy target. And I've debated with these cretins that say, well, you know, don't they think about taking in a lodger if they've got an extra bedroom? Well, that's all right, isn't it, for them, for the Tory toffs and their mansions and their 12 and 14 bedrooms. They ought to try and live in a council or a housing association house where you can hardly swing a cat, never mind taking in a lodger. But it shows you just how little they know. Because if you did take in a lodger, you would lose your housing benefit. That's how stupid they are with their arguments. These people are totally and utterly out of touch with everyday reality. We have got an opportunity here in our wee small country to do things differently. See, the consensus we've got isn't the same as the consensus in Westminster. It's interesting, the TUC, the Trade Union Congress, conducted a major study where they asked the general population how much of the welfare budget was claimed by the unemployed. and the average response was 48%. 48%. The reality is 7%. But where does the general population get that from? From the Daily Mail and the Sun and these politicians that want to hound and scapegoat the poor. The general population was asked, how much of the welfare budget is fraudulently claimed? Because we hear it all the time, don't we? The benefit cheats. There's even adverts, isn't there? On the telly, the radio, the bus shelters on the buses. We're coming after you. Because it's a massive problem, isn't it? Because the general population, when asked how much of the welfare budget is fraudulently claimed, the average response was 28%. That's how much people think is fraudulently claimed. What's the reality? 0.7%. 0.7%. Brothers and sisters, I've got to put this to you. 0.7% of the welfare budget is fraudulently claimed. Twice as much money isn't claimed by people that are due payments than is fraudulently claimed. Non-claiming of benefits is a bigger problem than fraudulent claims. Where's the big campaign to get people to claim their benefits? Where's the adverts in the telly for that? It's a tiny, minuscule part of the budget. But then you look at the other side of the coin. You ask yourself about the Starbucks of the world that have been operating in this country for 16 years. They have generated sales of over £3 billion. And in that time have managed to pay only £86 million in tax. A rate of 1%. Marvellous, eh? Wouldn't that be great if we all paid 1% tax? Starbucks gets away with it. Amazon gets away with it. Google gets away with it. Boots gets away with it. We have a situation now where the latest academic research suggests that non-payment of corporation tax across the UK leads to a loss to the exchequer of £120 billion a year. £120 billion a year. Crisis? What crisis? There'd be no need for cuts. Never mind cuts, we could increase benefits. We could increase minimum wage. We could have a lower retirement age. We could have free school meals for primary and secondary schools. If we could only get the rich to pay their bloody taxes, that's what we could do. We have a chance, brothers and sisters, a once-in-a-lifetime chance, perhaps, to say on 18th September that we stand for something different, that we actually value humanity itself, that we actually recognise something called human solidarity, where we actually believe that our old folk should be looked after. We actually believe that our children should get a decent start in life. We actually believe in something called the welfare net that actually looks after people. That's the choice. You've got a choice on 18th September. And some people say, Tommy, but what about that I? Can you dot it? What about that T? Can you cross it? And the truth is, if I could dot the I's and cross the T's, I'd have won the lottery a long time ago. There is no way, shape or form that we can answer every question. But we can certainly repel the nonsense. Oh, if you vote for independence, we'll have border controls. Oh, if you vote for independence, we'll lose the pound. Why would you lose the pound? It's as much ours as anybody else's. Why would we lose the pound? What a cheek to get wee Wally Haig rolled into Glasgow last week there. Wee Wally coming up to warn us about independence. He bloody warned us about devolution and he was wrong about that. Why would he be right about independence? Let's not be taken in by this doom and gloom that is promoted by the No campaign. And by the way, I'm not going to ever go individually at people who, for some reasons that I could recognise, are going to vote no. There are some good people still. I had a wee discussion recently online with someone who said if there was an independent socialist republic on offer, they would vote yes on the 18th of September. But it's not on offer, so they're going to vote no. And you know, I said that's negative, and it's also failing to look at the bigger picture. You see, my vision of independence might not be yours. My vision of independence certainly won't be shared by the higher echelons of the SNP, shall we say. Personally, and this is only personally, I'm not interested in putting the monarchy on a diet. I don't want a slimmed down monarchy. I want rid of the monarchy. That's my position. I also don't want oil and gas and electricity to be run for private profit. I think it should be run for social need. And I think any surplus that's generated, and by the way, how could you not fail to generate a surplus by selling gas and electricity, for goodness sakes? It's not as if you've got a choice, is it? Why don't we do what most other countries in the world do? Publicly own their oil, their gas and their electricity. That's what we should do. People wonder about how we're going to pay for things. We're a country that is absolutely rich in land, water, the ability to generate energy, not just in relation to gas and electricity, but from wind and wave power as well. We have got an abundance of universities. We have got fantastic engineering capabilities. We've also got something which, personally, in an independent Scotland, I'll be fighting hard for. I can never understand why it is that we've got a publicly owned health service and a privately owned pharmaceutical industry. Why the hell should we allow them to rip us off? Let's have a publicly owned pharmaceutical industry to feed our publicly owned health service. That's the type of things we could do in an independent Scotland. The world is our oyster. Voting for independence isn't the end of the journey, brothers and sisters. It's only the start of the journey. That's the reality of voting for independence. We know the trajectory we're on. We know that we're going to build a country that's based on social justice. We know we're going to build a country that promotes equality. We know we're going to build a country that doesn't scapegoat the poor or those who, like many of us, were immigrants when we came to this country. We're not going to scapegoat anyone who comes and wants to work and live in our wee small country. Brothers and sisters, I think we would be fools to throw away this chance. Fools to throw away the opportunity to build a wee country that would become the envy of many in the world. You know, I was looking today through some of the poverty statistics, and I was looking at UK, 12.8% of the population living in real poverty, 25% of children living in poverty. And then I had a wee glance at Norway, Denmark, Finland, less than 5%, both poverty and child poverty. And I think to myself, you hear these people say, oh, you're not big enough. How's he going to survive? These countries, Norway for instance, it's now accepted that it's second in the world in terms of global wealth, and it's second in the world in terms of global happiness as well. Wee country, less than us, 4.9 million people, and yet they are away up there. Where are we doing at 16th? Brothers and sisters, we have got a chance here. We've got a chance to stand up straight, be proud, not that we're better than anybody. We're not better than anybody. Hey, but nobody else is better than us. We're equal. And we're going to take our rightful place at the world stage as a normal, sovereign nation. After September 18th, the politics, it will be consensual, it will be left of centre, and the Labour Party can rejuvenate. The SNP will certainly be fighting. They might have some battles even within their own party, because there are some people there who might want a different independent Scotland from others. Great, that's what democracy is all about. But the truth is, that central core of that new Scotland is going to be a fair country. And I'm going to finish, brothers and sisters, by referring to one other thing. And it's something that, in and of itself, is enough to convince me that we should vote for independence. So many reasons, isn't there? I mean, everybody's got their own reasons. The fact that we'll never ever have a Tory government again is one very good reason, I've got to say. Because in the consensual politics of Scotland, the Tories' right-wing extremism will not win anything like a majority. For goodness sakes, we've got more pandas than we have got elected Tory MPs. Does that not tell you something about the political priorities of the people of Scotland? So there's a good reason. Some people have said to me, you know, Tommy, you're a socialist. Are you not abandoning the working class in England and Wales? We'll never get rid of the Tories if Scotland goes independent. And it's a lie, it's a myth, deliberately promoted by people who know better. In all of the elections where Labour have won a majority in Westminster, they didn't rely on the Scottish votes. But since 1955, 32 years out of the 60 years since 1955, we've ended up with Tory governments that we never voted for. Wouldn't it be nice to have a country where you actually get the government that you vote for? Is that too much to ask? Democracy. It's called democracy. But brothers and sisters, that final reason, it's a reason that means quite a lot to me. I remember sharing a bit of the street, should I call it street, maybe a road, outside of the Faslane nuclear submarine base. And I shared it with one of my opponents, whom I still consider a friend, but he's my opponent in this argument. I shared a wee bit of the street with George Galloway. And George and I were there as part of the annual protests against nuclear weapons. And I was trying to explain to the police officers that I was there to uphold international law. In 1996, International Court of Justice found that nuclear weapons were illegal weapons, and that I was here to disarm the nuclear submarine base. You won't be surprised to learn that the police weren't very persuaded by that argument. George Galloway tells the story that he heard one of the police officers say to another, "You take the Allgene, we'll take Sheridan." He says he knew then that it was time to pass the torch on. I remind George of that story whenever I can. And the truth is, brothers and sisters, I've been arrested 6 times outside the Faslane nuclear submarine base. I've been put in prison 3 times because of it. And I think those weapons are offensive. I think they are inhumane. I think they're barbaric. I think they represent everything that's wrong with our world. That we can spend over £25 billion to renew these weapons of mass destruction. But we've got 3.5 billion people with less income than 85 people that you could fit in a double-decker bus. We've got kids starving. We've got children dying of easily preventable diseases like cholera because we don't have enough money to spend on medicines. But there's always enough money to spend on nuclear weapons. Brothers and sisters, what a message it is to the world. What a message it is. If we vote for independence on September 18th, we're also voting to get rid of nuclear weapons. See if you're not even persuaded by some of the other arguments. I've got to say to you, here's an opportunity for us to say loud and clear to the whole world, we're not going to spend £25 billion in scrap metal any longer, because that's what it is. Because it will never be used. If it's used, it's the end of the world. So why spend £25 billion on scrap metal when we could spend £25 billion in tackling poverty and inequality? That's the choices, brothers and sisters. Please, on September 18th, be responsible and courageous enough to recognise that that's the choice and vote yes. Thanks very much.